So Disney bought Star Wars, and then they went, yeah, we're going to nuke the expanded universe. And then all the Star Wars fans were like, okay, hurtful. And then they released Episode 7, and there was mostly praise. There was a lot of fans who were like, this is just Episode 4 again. I don't like this.
Even the people who like it, like me, acknowledge that it is just borrowing story beats from that movie.
I also like Episode 7. I will still say it's just Episode 4 again. So then fast forward a year, and we get Rogue One.
Yep.
And a lot of people liked it, but again, there was that very strong
Vocal minority
who was like, this is terrible. And at that point, everyone was like, you guys just hate. Then Episode 8 comes out.
Yep.
And I wouldn't call that a minority anymore. That was a split in the fan base. You either loved Episode 8 or you hated it. Of course, there are people who are like, it's fine. And don't really feel that strongly either way, but they weren't allowed to exist.
I am one of those people. I think it's pretty good.
I'll be honest, I'm one of those people. I try not to be. I try to be casual with my love for Episode 8, but like when I say I enjoyed Episode 8 a lot, people just get on my case about it. Side tangent note, the Star Wars fan base is incredibly toxic. I don't care. Like, I've seen a lot of articles being like, it's a vocal minority. No, this has been a problem in the fan base since the prequels. Like,
Right, but I still argue it's the minority of the fan base.
I can't get behind that it's
Do
a
you
minority.
think most Star Wars fans are toxic?
Yes.
I disagree strongly.
I disagree with your disagreement.
I think that most Star Wars fans are just people who like Star Wars.
Yeah, people take their love of Star Wars way too seriously.
Not so much in this culture anymore. I mean...
Yeah, more so in this culture, dude.
No.
People in this culture are defined by their fandoms.
No, because
Yes,
Star Wars
100%.
isn't that hot newness anymore. Like, Marvel's that hot newness. Everyone's all about the Marvel movies. Star Wars still has that echoing of, like, yeah, also, it had the biggest impact of all time on movies, yes, but
You can't make it sound like Star Wars is just this background thing. Star Wars still has one of the biggest franchises in the world.
I agree.
And sure, it's not that hot new thing. That means it's got longevity. It's got fans of the older crowd who have been fans since the 70s.
Right, but you don't make $2 billion or $1 billion at the box office by having people watch it only once. People went back to watch it. And to suggest that most of the people that bought tickets to those movies hated it, I think is ridiculous.
But Last Jedi didn't make $2 billion.
It made 1.2 or 1.3, which is still
Which
something
is still below expectations.
It's only made $1 billion.
$500 million below expectations, dude.
It only made over $1 billion. Where's your $1 billion? Like,
500. That is $500,000 below its expected finale.
Most movies would kill to make half that money.
That doesn't matter, though. What matters is it still didn't perform the way. It's like how
overperformed
Justice
at the
League,
box office.
But no, it didn't. It underperformed.
It overperformed. It cracked even and made lots and lots of profit.
But Disney was still expecting it to crack more money. Just because it made a lot of money, that's how business people work. They go, sure, it made $1 million, but can it make $10 million? That's how it works.
Well,
just because 1.2 billion is a lot of money doesn't mean that's what they were expecting. They were projecting 1.8 to $2 billion for Last Jedi. It did not reach that, which means it is, in a way, a failure. It didn't reach what it wanted. Just like how Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice didn't reach $1 billion like Warner Bros. Wanted to. You can call that a fantasy or a want, but that's still what they want, and they want that as a corporation. So it still matters that these movies don't make what they are
at the same
told
time,
to make.
Literally, on paper, those movies are crazy profitable and made a lot of return of investment for the studio.
That's why they're going to keep making them.
Exactly. That's my
But
point.
then
So this
we get to the next movie,
Okay.
Han Solo.
Yeah.
That did not make.
You cannot.
$1 billion.
Can argue at all that movie made any kind of profit. That was a huge bomb.
Huge bomb.
It's very unfortunate.
Now, I'm not saying it's just because people didn't like Episode 8. I think there are a lot of factors that went into Solo bombing, from
Yes.
the problems behind the scenes to general fatigue. That movie got released 5 months after Last
I agree
Jedi.
completely. All the Star Wars movies were a year apart at least. And then this one
The
was-
original trilogy, they did every 3 years, which I think is the way to go.
right.
They've,
Same with the prequel trilogy too, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
And since Disney's gotten the product, even 3 years between Sith and the Clone Wars movie, 2005, 2008, since Disney's gotten the product, they've done the main series every 2 years, and then the years in between they release an anthology film, which means we're getting a Star Wars movie every year.
Yep. Not anymore, but that was their plan.
That was their plan, which I can't say is a bad idea, but they clearly did not plan anything out. Not in the long term, at the very least.
Do you mean for the episodes or the anthology?
The episodes.
Okay.
Anthologies, you don't really have to plan out. As in, you don't have to make them all flow.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like, no one's expecting Rogue One to tie into Solo.
Exactly. Well, the thing is, as far as the sequel trilogy, you don't really have to make it planned out. You just have to make it open to a sequel, which they did.
I disagree that you just have to leave it open.
Well,
you
that's what
have to
Star
have
Wars,
some sort of cohesion.
The original trilogy did that.
The original trilogy, but not the prequels. Lucas has said for a long time that after he wrote the first Star Wars movie, he was planning like this big like 12-part series.
I'm sure he was.
But it's not like he just came up with the plot for the next movie once he was done. He had ideas for the next movie.
Well, yes, but you also need to focus entirely on the movie that you're making, and I think Lucas in the original trilogy did that, and also Star Wars with the Disney trilogy have also done that.
But still, you can't just focus on one movie. You need to when you are planning, you're not just planning one movie. You are saying, I want to make a trilogy.
Are you arguing for sequel bait?
No, I'm arguing that, like, okay, what about Lord of the Rings?
Okay.
That's 3 movies. That flows as one story.
Yeah, it's one gigantic story, yeah. I don't really see any of those as standalone movies. Maybe Return
I'm not
of the King,
asking.
maybe.
Sequel bait is setting up a sequel in the last 10 minutes, saying the story's going to continue even though it concluded. That's sequel bait. That's sequel bait. Star Wars doesn't, in my opinion, doesn't do sequel bait. It's
Really? Maz Kanata going, that's a story for another time isn't sequel bait?
That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the original trilogy.
Okay, but I don't really see any too much sequel. Except for Empire Strikes Back's cliffhanger, I don't see any sequel bait in first Star Wars.
Yeah, but it's still a coherent story.
Right. Do you not think that the sequel trilogy is?
No, I think it is. I just think it could have been a better, more coherent story because they're clearly not planning these movies out.
See, I kind of like the idea that the movies are kind of stand on their own-ish. Like, yes, Last Jedi is a direct sequel to Force, but Force Awakens is kind of its own thing. Like, it borrows elements from the previous ones, but it's also like, you can watch that without having seen a Star Wars movie. Case in point, Ian did. So
Yeah.
I think that works a lot better than, like, saying, this is directly after Return of the Jedi. Like, I'm not huge into that.
Which is fine, but you also need to factor in the fact that it's not Star Wars The Force Awakens. It's Star Wars Episode 7.
Right. Well,
It's
the first one was
acknowledging,
episode 4.
hey, there's 6. Well, that's a different thing. That's a retroactive, hey, there's actually a story before this.
Exactly. But, like, my point is, just calling a movie a number does not mean that you have to watch
But
one
it's
before it.
acknowledging that it's part of a series.
Right.
Would you start watching a show on season 3?
We all started watching Star Wars in episode 4.
But that's different because you were told, hey, this is season 1, and then they made season 2 and season 3, and then they went back and made a crappy spin-off about a couple characters from the original series, and nobody liked it because it went from HBO to the CW.
This is a long metaphor. Hold on.
I don't know. I'm just trying to joke. But still, I think it's important for a Star Wars trilogy to not just go make a movie and then worry about the sequel afterwards. Especially when you are saying we are making a trilogy, you need to plan out that trilogy.
Well, I think they've done a pretty good job at the very least, like planning out general story beats. I just don't think that they necessarily have to shove in all of these like wait till the next one things in the movie that they're currently making.
And I think that ultimately stems back to the problem of having J.J. Abrams make the first one.
I think he's one of the best choices you could have had. I mean, he's really good at him and James Wan are really good at revitalizing franchises, I'd say.
I mean, what else has James Wan done?
He's revigorated Fast and Furious during the Paul Walker incident. He's made The Conjuring the only post-Marvel successful cinematic universe. Now he's Aquaman. He made a good DC movie, which is impossible, basically. I mean, like, he's all over the place.
I don't know. The way I see it is J.J. Abrams is good, but his style is just so J.J. Abrams that handing it off after the first part just didn't work.
Well, would you say that Force Awakens is closer in tone and style to the original Star Wars or his Star Trek movies?
Star Trek movies.
I would say the original Star Wars.
I disagree. But I also wouldn't say that his Star Trek reboot doesn't feel more like a Star Wars movie.
Really?
Yeah. Do you watch a lot of Star Trek?
I don't. I just watched the new trilogy with Abrams.
I watch the Star Trek shows.
Okay.
It's not as much, I'm going to say, action.
Well, yeah, that's a big
It's
thing.
a
people
lot
standing.
for a space epic, it's a lot of standing around and talking.
Well, yeah, it's like pseudo-philosophy and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
So
that was a big complaint in the Star Trek reboot, was like everyone's like, you made it an action series, which
I can
I
see that
enjoy.
complaint, yeah.
But I've seen all 6 of the original Star Trek movies, and I think they're very good, and they are nothing like J.J. Abrams' film.
I would agree. I've seen the Wrath of Khan clips in the background when my mom put it on when I was a kid.
Yeah,
It's
it's a lot different.
I kept wanting to watch Star Wars instead.
Yeah. No, I understand that. So I would say that his Star Wars reboot is more in tune with his Star Trek reboot, but at the same time, I feel that his Star Trek reboot is closer to Star Wars. So it's kind of a chain, if
Right.
you will. It's like when a series is inspired by another series from like a super long time ago that nobody's heard of, like Flash Gordon in Star Wars.
Exactly.
And then they remade Flash Gordon and everyone went, you just did Star Wars. And
Yeah,
then
yeah.
everyone was like, but Star Wars is based on Flash Gordon.
Yes, it's like the Mummy reboot because the Universal monsters were the first cinematic universe, and then Marvel made it big and popular.
And now everyone's like, you're just copying Marvel.
Yeah,
and it's
the
like,
Mummy
but we
copied
did
Marvel.
it first.
They did it first, but it just pains me that they're doing it so bad now.
Oh yeah, but that's a different topic.
Right, but that's the
like
same
that's
thing.
what I mean. Is like that's how it kind of feels. Is like, oh, you're just copying Star Trek, but Star Trek was copying Star. It's a cyclic
It's a cycle, yeah.
It's a cycle. That's what I mean, though. So, episode 8 and episode 7, I feel. As much as I really like episode 8, and I still like episode 7, I feel like there are problems in the narrative that stem from switching directors, not only switching directors, but switching writers. It's almost like they didn't help each other at all.
So this ties back in. Do you think that Abrams is a good pick to do 9?
Yes.
Me too.
Given that he started it, I think he'll be okay with finishing it. My main concern, and I really don't think they're going to do this, but irrational fear is that Abrams is going to reverse on a lot of things that the fan base didn't like.
I don't think so, because the thing is, this movie, the episode 9, it's supposed to be the last Star Wars movie for a while because the anthology movies aren't doing so well. So they're like,
they need
this
to
is
take
it.
a break and figure out what
They're
going to
take a break after this. So like, the concerns of reversing things that fans didn't like on like a dime, like, oh no, this wasn't the way that was supposed to go.
Ray's
That's-
parents were actually Kenobis.
Exactly. That would be a very Warner Brothers DC thing to do because their movies are just reactionary moves to the last movies they made.
Yeah.
That's not really how Disney does things with Marvel or with Star Wars. So I would actually
But
I'm really excited.
let
to
me
see what they
ask
do.
this. When has there ever been a moment where they got a lot of backlash that would have been a time for them to pivot?
Backlash for them to pivot. Maybe Iron Man 3.
Really?
Yeah, because of the Mandarin twist. I think that pissed off a lot of fans.
My retort to that is, how do you go about fixing that if they're not making any more Iron Man films?
Well, in theory, if they were to make an Iron Man 4, I think they'd stick to their guns. I don't think they'd be like, but actually, there's a real Mandarin.
True, but I also know for a fact that there's a DVD extra clip that's
Yeah.
actually like there is a real Mandarin.
I know what you're talking about.
And as a fan who went, wow, that Mandarin twist was garbage. Don't think I'd appreciate if they put another Mandarin in and being like, oh, this was the real Mandarin all along.
Well, my point is, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, specifically what we're talking about, that would not, if you compare and contrast that to the DC Extended Universe, Batman vs. Superman and Suicide Squad are totally, completely different, but you can look at the DNA of Suicide Squad and go, that used to be the same tone and style as Batman vs. Superman, just cut up now.
Oh,
so you can see how they changed everything.
I agree.
Marvel has not done anything to that extent. The worst they've come is Ant-Man, and they still salvaged it and made it a passable Marvel movie. So I don't think they have any like.
See, but my
reaction
point
thing.
is that a pivot to fan backlash?
No.
Or is that internal problems?
No, that's just I'm comparing that because of the director issues and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah. I
but,
know, I agree there.
There's no situation in the MCU where they have had backlash for a movie and then pivoted immediately because of it. And they've had some backlash, like the Iron Man 3 thing.
Yeah. But my point is, was the Iron Man 3 thing something that they could really act upon, given that that is the end of a trilogy? Let me give it this way to you.
Let's tie it into this. Do you think that they're really it's gonna matter to them, considering that this is the end of a trilogy and they're not gonna make an episode 10 for any time soon?
Again, I'm not saying this is going to happen. I'm saying it's an irrational fear of mine. Because, again,
It's an understandable fear.
as someone who really enjoyed episode 8, I think it tied up a lot of plot points fine. I didn't really care who Snoke was. I didn't really care who Rey's parents were.
Exactly.
You know?
I mean, all the arguments of they didn't expand on Snoke, they didn't expand on the Emperor.
Emperor shows up in the last 15 minutes of episode 6 and suddenly zaps Luke with lightning.
Also, I really like the idea that going into episode 9, Kylo Ren is now the supreme leader of the First Order.
I like it too.
That's awesome to me.
I think the real big problem is that between episode 7 and 8 is the real first Star Wars movie without a significant time gap. Every other Star Wars movie has a gap of at least 1 year.
I don't think that's a huge issue.
I
mean,
think it is because it makes the story flow. Okay, this is going to sound really weird, and I know I just complained that they didn't map this out, but it feels like the two stories are like completely like intertwined. But then you watch them back to back, and it's like, no, there definitely could have been some gap time between this to make it flow a little bit better. You know, case in point, Rey suddenly being like Did she like what real training did she get from Luke aside from like a couple basic philosophies?
I mean, one could pull that all the way back to the first movie and say, how was she able to beat Kylo Ren with no training?
Yeah.
She had a stick on a planet, and she used a lightsaber to stop Kylo Ren when he's like supposedly a trained Jedi. Sorry, Sith, rather.
No, I agree.
So
I think that's definitely one of the moments. Even when people are like, well, you got to think that Rey's super trained with her blow staff, which means she knows weapons, and Kylo Ren was injured, and yada, 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 yada.
Kylo Ren was injured was the only thing going for that in that moment.
Again,
honestly.
I also see credence in the Rey. That bow staff is her bread and butter. She knows how to fight with, like...
And that's why I think she
melee
should get
weapons.
a Darth Maul-esque lightsaber in the episode 9.
That'd be so cool.
Right? My fans...
But even
my
then,
fans
I
want-
still have problems with it, because, like, Rey made Kylo Ren look like a scrub.
Yeah.
She humiliated him. I would have bought it more if, like, Rey just barely clinched out a victory. You
She
know?
gave him a scar that, in movie classic tradition, moved in the side of his face from the sequel.
Made him hot.
As opposed to earlier, it was also hot.
And Adam Driver's deformed, all right?
Look, he's one of us with his
Big-
giant nose.
big nose.
He has a big nose citizen.
We're kind of beating around the bush here. Let's get, because we've already been talking for a half an hour.
The point is, we love Adam Driver's nose. That's the only thing to take away from this.
Episode 9. So I actually want to know what you want from episode 9.
What do I want from it? Well, okay. I was actually about to elaborate on this point. I want Rey's lightsaber to be the Darth Maul-esque thing, but the top half, or rather, one blade to be blue, one blade to be green.
So in that case, she'd need 2 blades just welded together.
Right. So she has the both halves of the Skywalker thing. So in theory, it's not that difficult to like construct something with something similar coming out of it. You know.
Well, she has Skywalker's crystal. At the very least, she has another Kyber crystal, which is the part that goes in the lightsaber.
Exactly.
And she has all the sacred texts. I can buy that somewhere in those sacred texts is like lightsaber building instructions.
Exactly.
The problem comes if you want another blade to be green, she'll need another Kyber crystal.
Maybe that's part of the plot, or maybe it's just done off screen. Maybe Maz Kanata is like, "Hey, I have an extra one." Who knows?
Maybe. Maybe.
That
I
could be
wouldn't
fun
I'm not
neighborhood.
gonna be one of those fans who's like, they didn't even explain where the Kyber crystal came from. Like, who cares?
You could make that argument for anything that ever
You
happened.
can make that argument about episode 6 when Luke shows up a Jedi Master despite getting his crap wrecked in the previous movie. Seriously, Vader pushed it in.
Exactly.
Luke leaves that. Luke at the end of the movie is shaking, traumatized, with a black eye, missing a hand, and he shows up in the next movie like he won that fight.
Yeah, well,
It's
you get
bull.
robot hand, and you're perfectly fine, ready to
Yeah,
go.
it's bull. Like, there's no character growth. It all happens off screen. Luke fails to success. I've always said that about the original trilogy.
He does.
Luke fails to success. He fails upwards.
What would you say Rey does? Rey just suddenly succeeds?
I'd say Rey also fails upwards.
Really?
Rey fails a lot.
Well, what's a point where Rey really struggled?
I would say probably, like, what do you mean by struggled?
Like, the only thing that comes to mind right now is when her and Kylo Ren fight together, and then afterwards she's like, "Save the fleet," and he's like, "No," and then they have like a back and forth. That would be a point where I think Rey would like really struggle.
Yeah.
If you want to get like physical than when Kylo Ren got her hostage.
I think maybe when Kylo has her hostage in the first movie,
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
you know, in episode 8, like you were saying, when they fight, and then she tries to convince Kylo to join the light side again.
That you can really feel that loss that she has.
I'd also
of
say
saving
a
him.
little bit in episode 8, Rey really struggles with motivating Luke, and she again fails in that up until I'd say at the end she succeeds in that, but I don't think Rey, like a lot of people complain that Rey is this like do no wrong character, when in reality I feel like she makes a lot of mistakes.
Fair.
Like, she's like, I immediately trust Kylo Ren. I'm going to go see him. Oh, I'm captured. I walked right into this because I'm naive.
I know. I mean, I don't even understand that because she knew that she like could, or there's a high chance she could be captured, and she's like, "Yeah, I'll just go in anyway."
Yeah, I'll try. I'm going to go save Kylo. Immediately gets captured and then is told, yeah, we knew you were going to do this. We literally lured you in. It's like...
Also, want to point out that if Kylo Ren did not betray Snoke and want all that power of the throne,
Rey'd
would
be dead.
Probably be dead.
Yeah, 100%.
The First Order would probably win.
Yeah.
More or
no,
less.
yeah. Rey is only saved in that moment by Kylo, so you
Yep.
can't say that Rey is like a do no wrong character. And then people will be like, oh, well, Rey got him to switch sides. Well, no, he's conflicted. It's beyond just his relationship with Rey.
Exactly. I mean, to
So
me, it's
aside
just-
from Rey's aesthetic, what do you want, like, story-wise?
aside from the aesthetic, I want Okay, well, what drives these two movies so far and going into the third for me is one of my favorite villains on screen, Kylo Ren. I am unabashedly a huge fan of Kylo Ren. I love
No
his
characters,
character.
only Kylo Ren.
Only Kylo Ren. So I want to see, because he's the definition on screen of what to do as a conflicted character. How do you write a conflicted character? Because so many movies have what they call conflicted characters, but are really just inconsistent characters. Kylo Ren is very consistent, but his confliction makes him ebb back and forth on the sides of the Force and stuff like that. With the biggest moment for me of him being merciful would be hesitating off the trigger for killing Carrie Fisher, right?
Killing Leia, not killing Carrie Fisher.
Not the real human. Rest in peace. I'm sorry. But, listen. Okay. But the point is, I want to see that more so developed. I want to see, because since that's the biggest light side moment he's had so far, and it's arguably pretty small comparatively, I want to see a bigger light side moment. I want to see him almost do something wonderful, or almost spare Rey's life, or even just spare Rey's life in a certain moment or something like that. I want to see him have a moment where we really get to see how conflicted he is and see that tested a little bit further, maybe by what Rey says or does to him. So
Okay.
now, before I get into your personal thoughts, how would you feel if the huge fan theory of Reylo comes to life?
I don't really care.
Okay. You don't have any strong feelings against it?
No, not really.
I would strongly dislike it. I've read a lot about this online. It looks awful.
Like that they're gonna smash.
They're gonna be like a thing. I disagree.
I feel like Star Wars, even when it was trying to be a romance, is never been a romance. Personal opinion.
Well, just because 7 and 8 are borrowing so much from the original trilogy, it's like as if Luke and Vader got together. Like, it's so unfitting.
Well,
you know?
by that logic,
twist
that means Poe and Finn have to get together because they're this universe.
I'd be down for that.
I would be too.
That would work
Oscar
really
Isaac
well.
and John Boyega have amazing chemistry.
Exactly. More than Rey and Kylo, I'd argue.
Yeah. I have no strong feelings towards Reylo either way, as long as it's done well. And I know that's kind of a cheap cop out thing, but like, I can see how you would do this well, and I can see how you'd do it poorly.
I agree.
Like, there's the poorly version of, characters saying that they're in love with each other, which happens a lot.
Boy, does it.
Yeah. Okay, Game of Thrones in the later seasons, like season 6 and season 7, when Jon and Dany meet, there's a lot of scenes where like Davos and all their advisors and Melisandre and Missandei are like, yeah, I see the way you look at him. Yeah, you like him. And I'm like, I don't feel that. I don't buy that. And then you go back and you watch like season 3, where it's Jon and Ygritte together, and they're literally like flirting with each other, and it probably helps that Rose Leslie and Kit Harington were dating in real life at the time, but like,
Right.
all the same, there's the line between like they are in love and you are being told they are in love.
Well, I'd argue that in the later season, the latest season of Thrones, when they're getting together, they, on paper, they have a really nice chemistry. On paper, you get that Dany would like him because as a character, he's the only one who's not like sucking up to her. He like treats her as like a regular person.
Yeah, no, you can see how, but in the execution, it's just Davos telling Jon, "I see the way you're looking at her." I don't know why that was my
Yeah,
Davos
but, like,
impression, but
no, that was actually not that
Thanks.
bad. But I mean, like, yeah, I see the way you're looking at it, but like that whole setup right there, like they're both incredibly attractive people because obviously it's Hollywood, but like everyone else in the show, they have like dirt makeup over their face because they're grizzled and they're hardened.
okay. But you don't need to be attractive. Like, there's more to attraction than
I
that.
agree. I just don't think
Especially
there's a whole
'cause
lot more
both-
as far as the characters go.
I agree too, but that being said, you can have a scene where it's just Jon and Dany talking about like their different views on like ruling.
There
And
was
that can be
right before she attacked the Lannisters with her dragon, one of them. Right before that, when he's like, "If you do this, they're just gonna hate you and bully
yeah,
you."
but that's okay,
Are you
but
saying
that's-
for more scenes like that?
more scenes differently than that, because that's not discussion, that's advice. That's advice. I'm talking like, I want a scene of like Jon and Dany chilling out on the beach of Dragonstone or something, just talking about like their separate journeys to get there and realizing that they're very similar, you know, and then that being flirting. When it's, well, your grace, I've lived amongst these people 1,000 years and yada yada. That's not discussion, that's advice. Hey, don't do this. Do this instead. Trust me, I know, yeah, of reasons X, Y, and Z. But if it's more Jon being like, well, how would you handle this? And then Dany saying, I'd do this. And then Jon going, well, what about this? That's discussion.
All right,
This is
fair
also way off topic.
Yeah, we've strayed
Sorry.
so far.
My point is, Raylo, I don't really care either way as long
So
as
what,
it's...
what are you expecting from 9?
I'm expecting... I want to see... This is probably just my inner anarchist. I want to see the complete universal destruction of any semblance of galactic order. First Order, New Republic, I want it to just burn to the ground.
Is this part of this because you don't want to see any more reemergences of...
No. It's part of the cycle that I see in the Star Wars universe. You know, and it also borrows from Tolkienism of like, in order to... And also Kylo Ren, kill the past. Basically, I want the characters to realize for too long it's been Jedi versus Sith, Empire versus Republic. We need to just, in the words of Killmonger, burn it all.
Get rid of any semblance of them.
Just get rid of any semblance of them and start over. Whether that means isolation between all the planets, whether that means no more overarching galactic rule, whether it's an opt-in system, I don't want them to get too far into it because then we're going to get into like prequel levels of politics, and I enjoy politics in movies, and that bored me quite a bit, aside from the vote of no confidence scene. Point is, that's what I want to see, is I want to see a character come to the realization, preferably Rey, of like, no, we need to just
Get rid of them, yeah.
universal reset button. And I think it would play off well Kylo's, get rid of the past, kill it if you have to. And I think it would be cool if you see Rey taking the enemy's philosophy, but taking more literally, and Rey being like, you say you want to kill the past, but you're just the new emperor.
Yeah, fair point. I like it.
Thank you.
Most important, when Rey and Kylo have that lightsaber duel, it better not last like 2 freaking minutes.
Better
Gotta
be
like
long.
a good one, yeah.
Yeah.
Because they didn't really have like a duel. They had like a back-to-back scene.
They've had like a melee. They've had a quick little melee in episode 7, which was off of what is, in my opinion, the better fight between John Boyega and Adam Driver. Because like, it's cool because Finn's not a Force user, and you're like, oh, this is like deadly.
Well, I went into episode 7 without like reading up on it and stuff like that. I thought that John Boyega was going to be the main character.
Oh, me too. I thought he was going to be the Jedi.
Really?
Yeah.
See,
Well, I saw the trailers, and he holds the lightsaber, and
Exactly.
I go, oh, he's
so when the
holding a
lightsaber goes
lightsaber.
flying to him, I assumed to him, but based on how
It
it's
went
shot,
to
and
Rey.
it went to Rey, and I was like, oh!
See, no, I was starting to slowly realize, oh, Finn's not using the Force.
Well, the first half of the movie follows
Finn.
with his clone story coming out. Not the clone, the Stormtroopers one. And he's like, oh, he's so affected by this, he's deviating, and he's the one.
And then he has no problem with killing stormtroopers.
Exactly.
Yeah, that could have been handled a lot better. That's
Well,
another problem I have with episode 7 is like, Finn's like, I'm so traumatized by watching murder. And then later on in the scene, you just see him mercilessly run through a stormtrooper with a lightsaber. And you're just like, I think it would have been cooler if we saw this transformation from Finn, to bring up episode 8, more like we saw in episode 8, where he's running away at the beginning of the movie, and by the end of the movie, he's willing to sacrifice himself.
I feel like they don't really know what to do with Finn.
I also feel that. I feel like they haven't really known what to do with Finn.
They did some creative things in the first one. They tried to get more so in the
I
second
feel
one.
like they've been like the entire time been like, oh, well, the other 2 movies have a trio. We need to have a trio in this one.
I watched New Hope somewhat recently, and what surprised me most was that the third act was so focused and simple.
Yeah.
And I have not seen like a blockbuster movie have such a simple, focused third act with one plot happening and it be so effective in such a long time.
There's a reason Star Wars is like the quintessential example of the hero's journey. It's like
all it is just shoot this one thing at this perfect time.
in terms of screenwriting, the first Star Wars movie is very simple. There's some high concept stuff in there for the in-universe.
Yeah.
You know, the Force,
it was
Lightspeed,
nominated
stuff
for
like
Best Picture.
Yeah,
For Christ's sake.
but
I mean,
like,
damn.
but like, my point is like, in terms of like, it's not this over the top crazy thing. It's a very simple, very straightforward story. I'd argue there isn't even really a B plot in that movie.
Not even just all of the sequels have multiple plots, but every movie that came afterwards that has like a high concept has more than one plot going.
Yeah.
And that to me is just like, wow.
Yeah. And like another thing is Star Wars, here's another thing. The first Star Wars movie switches perspectives like 30 minutes in. At first you think it's about the droids, and then we switch to Luke. And then R2-D2 and C-3PO take a step back. I can't really think of a lot of movies that can pull off a POV switch like that.
I agree.
Like a lot of people were jarred by POV switches. Like, oh, we're focusing on a new character even though it's been like 40 minutes.
Who cares? I mean, Psycho killed the main character in the first 30, 40 minutes?
Yeah.
Give or take?
Force Awakens didn't really have a B plot until the third act when they split up Rey and Finn. You know, that movie was very focused. Sure, it would cut back to like Kylo Ren and stuff, but like that just played back into, well, they're hunting Finn and Rey. So it's still the same plot.
Yeah, it all ties in. Obviously, like, nothing in Star Wars movies has plots that are wildly different from each other, except
Yeah.
maybe the prequels.
Even
me think here.
then, I mean,
Well, I'd say episode 1 doesn't have a B plot or a plot.